Hi, everyone. All right, we see you joining. Hello. Welcome. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Welcome. All right. Give it just a few more moments. And in the chat box, I'll put today's links. And this has information about the San Francisco Public Library, as well as information about the San Francisco upcoming events. The link to this YouTube that you can watch later and share with all your friends. Links to our artists today and their work they did with Frankenstein. And if anything comes up interesting, especially if we can bring it back to the library, I'll add those during the panel. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We want to welcome you here to Ohlone Land. This is where we reside in San Francisco. You can always let us know what, whoops, let me hit enter on those links. What territory you're on with this great map called Native Land. We are here to honor and respect the Ohlone folks who are still here today. And with that, respect the land, the places we live, clean up after each other, and love each other. This needs to be a powerful time of love in our world. Upcoming events, especially creative art events for all of our artists out there. Tuesday, we're going to have a walking tour of public art, and this could be given by a librarian who's very knowledgeable. So come through, meet us at the Powell Street BART station. Next Saturday, we'll have a collage day, and this is part of our 100 Years of Surrealism celebration, which we have a lot of events surrounding the 100 Years of Surrealism, including film, hands-on, lots of book displays, both here on the 4th floor and the 3rd floor of the main library. The San Francisco Ballet will be joining us Tuesday, April 29th, 6 p.m. I hope you all come out for this because we need people at the library in the evening. It's a chair dance. I'm moving a grand piano, so come to this. There's going to be live piano accompaniment. And if you haven't gone to see the ballet's production of Frankenstein, I definitely encourage you to do so. And in fact, if you're on our newsletter, watch out for a discount code. Our library will be celebrating World Collage Day on Saturday, May 10th, with 3 full hours of collage making. And this will be in our 4th floor Steve Silver room, which if you haven't been there, it is beautiful and serene and just a great place to get creative. All right, and then I want to introduce our next upcoming exhibit, which is the amazing photography of Harry Williams. If you're ever on Jones and Ellis Street, you can see his wheat paste of our neighbors. His photographs are amazingly powerful, sometimes sad, but also really joyful and shows the resilience of the Tenderloin neighborhood, which the main library is the heart of. So we'll hope you'll come out for that. All right, so I would love to share with everyone here the works that are on exhibit. So we're going to take a few minutes just to go ahead and enjoy these works from our artists.
I try to walk straight and tall and narrow. It's just a stagger with a beat. They call me Frankenstein. That's not even my name. Frankenstein, I don't know my name. Frankenstein, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I've done. I told him, Victor, you got to build me a wall. Who will see me for myself? It's so lonely living here without someone to love. I gotta look out for myself. They call me Frankenstein. That's not even my name. I try to walk straight and tall and narrow. It's just a stagger with a beat. They call me Frankenstein. That's not even my name. Frankenstein, I don't know my name. Frankenstein, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I've done. I told him, Victor, you got to build me a wall. Who will see me for myself? It's so lonely living here without someone to love. I gotta look out for myself. They call me Frankenstein. That's not even mine. I've done. I told him, Victor, you got to build me a wall. Who will see me for myself? It's so lonely living here without someone to love. I gotta look out for myself. They call me Frankenstein. That's not even mine.
Okay, I'm obviously not a sound technologist, so pardon that Frankenstein together piece of music that I put with that. But that did give you a glimpse of all the pieces that are in the exhibit. I encourage you all to come to San Francisco Public Library and see the exhibit in person. It will be up until June 30th. All right, so I'm going to introduce our artists and then we'll jump into some questions and hopefully have time for some Q&A. You can also use the Q&A function or just use the River of Consciousness there, the chat. So let's start out with our artists and I'm going to confirm who's here. All right, so we have Marta Janik, a collage artist working in analog, digital, and animation based in Warsaw. She previously lived in Berlin, where she guided at the Salvador Dali Museum. She studied literature and computer graphics and is drawn to surrealism, kitsch, and circus imagery. Janik created a collage animation music video for Polish icon Alicia Majewska.
Majewska?
Thank you. Commissioned by Sony Music Entertainment Poland. She runs collage workshops, collaborates with the Museum of Caricature, and won the 2020 Warsaw Cultural Education Award. Her work has been exhibited in the US, Ireland, Germany, Italy, and Slovenia. We have David Edward Johnson. Thank you for being here. He is a mixed media artist working in Austin, Texas, and the Finger Lakes region of New York. His work explores belief systems, the rise and fall of the American dream, desire, identity, and loss. Blending abstract elements, he creates large-scale assemblage and that defy classification. Johnson describes his work as abstraction, definition, and deconstruction. His pieces have appeared in juried shows across the US, the other art fair, and selected galleries. His art has been featured on Andy Grammer's album covers, the Saatchi Art Catalog, and the London Art Biennale. Anthony D. Kelly is an illustrator, writer, visual artist, and psychotherapist based in Castlebar, Ireland. Using collage, poetry, and assemblage, he creates works that are hopeful, satirical, and occasionally unnerving. A former curator at Cork's Basement Project Space, Kelly was Collage magazine's World Collage Artist in 2023. He has exhibited internationally with work in the collections of the Mayo County Council, Collage Institute, and the Henry Shelton Museum. His art appears in Collage magazine, Art Reveal, and more. Kelly explores the arts as a tool for social engagement, the interplay of literature and visual art, and the role of wonder in mental health. Awesome. And next up we have Rebecca Steiner, a collage artist from Lyme, Connecticut. Sorry, my glasses. Her work explores visual codes and perceptions of taste in the social construction and framing of gender and identity through the lens of domesticity, nostalgia, fashion, and style. Playing with art, historical and cultural imagery, theatrical vignettes, celebrates tropes of beauty, desire, and extravagance. They invite the viewer to indulge in the moment on display and to disconnect through a dream world fantasy while reflecting on the complexities and legacies of stereotypes and privilege. Steiner's work has been featured in Collage magazine and the exhibition, including the Every Woman Biennial 2024 at La Mama Gallery, at Map Space, Hudson Valley MoCA, Women Made Gallery, Bristol Art Museum, and an ongoing holiday project, Miss Florence's Artist Trees. And last, we have Jessica Tran Vo, an artist whose work in collages, mixed media. She graduated from BSU as a double major with a bachelor's degree in fine arts, English literature, with a focus on Irish literature, and a minor in art history. Her background is in acrylic and oil painting on canvas and mixed media. She collages digitally and on paper with found images and incorporates elements of painting. Escapism and anxiety run undercut through her surrealist collages, dreamscapes, the element of nature, and flowers, and women reclaiming nature and space, deserts, etc. Her works play in a liminal space of diaspora and postmodernism. She is a queer, mixed Vietnamese American artist who works full-time at MIT's literature section, frequently researching visual representation for their literary and academic community. All right, and then there's me, Anissa Milady. I am your librarian host, but also one of the artists. And I live here in San Francisco, and I work at San Francisco Public Library. So I hope you will all come down, check out the exhibit, and let's jump into all these amazing artists. So we're gonna go ahead and actually, why don't we jump in? If anybody wants to say like an intro, welcome, a quick why I loved doing this Frankenstein, along with the Collage Institute, who we partnered with. Anthony, kick us off.
Sure. Yeah, this was a fantastic project. I have seen Frankenstein in pop culture, but I think I never really understood the full depth of the novel. And it was really great to get together with so many artists and really discuss all of those different points of view. Really helped me kind of, I suppose, access and get into the material in a way that I didn't really expect. And also to read a novel like this, knowing that you're going to illustrate it is a very interesting process because you're reading then for visual imagery, right? And I felt even internally, I was having a far more visual reading as I was looking for scenes that kind of resonated with me. So yes, it's great. If you haven't read the book, go for it. It's fantastic.
I agree. That whole like rereading of Frankenstein was, I mean, it had been so long, and then it seemed like we reread it about 5 times during this project. Rebecca.
This is a perfect follow-up. I was gonna say, read it, but actually listen to it, because I listened to it I read it and then I listened to it as I was driving around. And again, I also, like Anthony, it was a really interesting experience to be reading with the goal of translating the text into, translating it visually. It was fascinating to listen and then to replay certain parts, certain phrases that resonated, and to mark up the book, but all with the intent of creating images and of portraying the characters and bringing them to life. And I found that was really exciting and And I don't know, it was a great experience. The whole experience was fantastic. I actually almost quit at the beginning because I was so intimidated by everyone. And I mean, I think David, you and I talked about this. Everybody just from the start, from the get-go, everybody was just pouring out images, and I was completely stuck. And it took me a while to find my footing. We'll get to that later, but it was what an incredible group of people and artists and talent and intelligence and creativity, and also tenderness and kindness and support. Everybody was so kind and so discerning and so generous with the feedback. So that was also a really exciting and really lovely experience, especially following on the pandemic. Just lovely to find community like that.
I just wanted to build quickly on what Rebecca said. One of the kind of key components, first of all, novel, incredible, one of the, I don't know, most affecting books I've read in my life, to be honest. It's just, and I read a lot. It's just, it's so rich, so much depth there. Just a ton there to explore, and so it was perfect for this. But one of the things that, from a kind of an artistic or blocking and tackling standpoint, one of the kind of core tenets of this residency and what I absolutely loved was this was really in many ways about collaboration. So as much as we were working individually at times, it was really about what could we create together. And that in and of itself, I think had a power to it. And so yeah, just building quickly on what Rebecca was saying about this group of artists, just first of all, stunned by the talent, but also just privileged to be able to kind of create along with everybody. So that was a huge part of this for me.
I can jump in after David. I hadn't read Frankenstein before either, and I was really intimidated by just getting a month in to do all these collages. I was studying Robert Rauschenberg's work with Dante's Inferno, and he had 2 years. We only had a month, but we had like 13, 14, 15 people. So I think that helped a lot. And getting to bounce the idea off of people and like building off of the themes that we were seeing and quoting. And I think that was just the best way to like dive into a piece of literature that, you know, you weren't familiar with, or just really immersing yourself. Like it's been 2 years and I still feel like I'm thinking of Frankenstein every other day. Yeah.
Yeah, for me too. Like, I have the feeling that he's almost my friend, and I like Monster more than anybody else in the book. And I was very surprised by the deepness. You all mentioned how deep the book is, and I thought the same. I was very touched, like very sincerely touched by the monster and how full of emotions he was towards humanity in general, how much he wanted to be loved, to be understood, and he also wanted to understand. And for me, the most interesting parts were the parts when he's learning the language. I mentioned this so many times, but I think it is, I don't know, in pop culture, this is not being mentioned very often, but the monster tries to understand people. He tries to learn the language. He reads books. He reads Paradise Lost by John Milton. He reads Goethe. Oh my God. My teenager times book. Like, I really was shocked. And I was also amazed that it was written by such a young woman. Mary was only 18 when she wrote this. So yes, and residency, when I heard, and I must say that with Anthony Kelly, who is my friend, I'm very privileged to have a friend like this. We talked about monsters for years now, and because Anthony is interested in monsters in general. And this residency was great opportunity to go deeper. This is how we like to work, to go deeper into things. And for me, it was challenging because I have never worked together with so many people. And this is what we have to tell the audience. We all had these archives, we all had this imaginary, we all shared the images, we were sending starters to different people finished our beginnings. So it was alive all the time. Yeah.
Can I also say, when you bring up the sharing and sending it back and forth, the trust when you start something and you know that you can trust who you're sending it to, and that was amazing. Like that, there was this kind of implicit trust and good faith, and knowing that we all had each other's backs, but we were all building on the ideas, and everything got better every single time somebody else took it over. There was greater depth, greater layers, greater fabulousness. The other thing I did want to just say, though, is ever since then, I see Frankenstein everywhere. I'm reading the New York Times, there are Frankenstein hotkeys. AI, obviously, everything refers back to Frankenstein. And it is amazing, not only that Mary Shelley was so young, but how long ago this was written. And it's so relevant. I mean, I think you guys do too, see Frankenstein everywhere.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
there's the puppet theater in Łódź near Warsaw, another city. We have the musical now in Warsaw. Like it's one of the most important books ever written, right?
I agree. And it's not a surprise seeing it everywhere. So you have a relationship with the book, and then you go, well, obviously, because it's that good. Yeah, genuinely.
But also, like, I feel like my relationship with Frankenstein is with all of you guys. So for me, every time I see Frankenstein, the residency and shades of the residency come back to me.
I know
And
what you mean.
I feel
Yeah.
like I have this whole kind of silent support bubble always behind me, whether you guys are there or not. In my imagination, it's like what Frankenstein is looking for. I feel like I found through Frankenstein.
I love it. Well, we're there. Rest assured. Yeah.
Two monsters.
Yeah, the monster. That's why I love that song that I chose, is like Frankenstein's not the monster, or is he? Yeah, no,
Yeah,
just kidding.
exactly. The creature, as we kind of referred to him a lot. Yes.
Oh, wait,
And
the
Victor-
monster or Dr. Frankenstein? I'm sorry, Jessica, go
Yes,
ahead.
absolutely.
Oh no, sorry. Victor was 16 when he made the monster too. Shelley was 18. It's mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling that way. Yes.
Okay, let's just jump into some questions. I'm just going to mention that Maureen Letton has arrived. Yay. Maureen is a San Francisco-based collage artist, though in Paris, so yay for you. Influenced by cartoons, her mother's film industry work, and a love of random and unusual. After a career in pre-press and raising twin daughters, she returned to art during the pandemic, focusing on found objects, signs, and deserted streets. Maureen also came to the library to help me install this thing, so thank you so much. So
Thanks to you both. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think our audience wants to hear some actual questions since they're throwing them in there anyway. How did we approach translating the themes of Frankenstein, such as creation, identity, alienation, into the language of collage? And what unique challenges or opportunities did collage offer for this project?
I think that collage as a medium is perfect for this kind of work because it's really a process of fragmentation first, and then recontextualization, and then also recreation, right? So, I mean, even in the process of collaging, you are alienating something from its original environment, and then discovering a new positioning for it, and seeing how it exists in that new environment, right? There's also the very direct sort of cobbling together that happens that reflects the creation of the creature within the book. Yeah, so that would be.
I would like to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Anthony. I'm interested in surrealism, and I was thinking that with Frankenstein, we touch surrealism very deeply, and collage seems to be the best method to illustrate the book because it has to do with the unconscious mind. And I don't know how about you guys, but I had this feeling or those moments while creating the images when I started. I will give you the example. We, together with Anthony, we made the portrait of the monster. So Anthony sent me the beginning, and it was the figure, the whole figure. You just saw it in the screening a minute ago. It's the monster from behind, and I was very touched by the quote with the fire. There's a moment in the book when the monster discovers the fire. He finds the traveler in the mountains, and then he tries to keep it alive, and then he's very surprised that the fire gives you warmth, but also can cause the pain. And I was working on the piece Anthony sent me, and I was sure that I would like to put the fire into the illustration. And then I clicked something, I don't know how it happened, but then the fire was inside of the monster suddenly. Like in his veins, you can see the fire. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is this, right? Because in collage, you just take few elements from different worlds, and then you realize, oh my God, I created something I didn't even plan it. It just happened. And this is very surrealistic experience, right? When you take this, you have a dream, you do this, and then suddenly you discover, oh my God, the monster has a fire in veins. How cool is that? He is
Right.
passionate, right? He's filled with many emotions. So these were the moments I cherished the most, according to the book, according to the residency, and according to Art of Collage. And I just want to say something, that it all started with a dream, actually. Mary Shelley had a dream before she wrote the book. She wrote that she had had the dream. So the monster came to her in a dream. And I think this is extraordinary.
When you're talking about the fire, that's like the spark of life of Frankenstein coming to life,
Yeah.
is the experience that it sounds like you had.
Yes.
I wanted to say, for me, one thing that really struck me is that collage is Frankenstein. I mean, Frankenstein, the monster, is a collage that Victor built. So I kept channeling that idea that Frankenstein himself is a collage. And I actually, when I was working on Frankenstein's Bride, it's this figure, and then there's the red stitching, and which Maureen and I ended up working on together, which was so fun. And I was actually channeling that idea of Frankenstein himself being a collage. And as I was thinking about how to configure stitching on the figure, I ended up actually using red thread and actually stitching, which was quite terrifying, because I could either have ruined it, and then I realized, no, the monster, like, that's the part of it, is that the more kind of ragged or the more destroyed it is, the better, because that mimics Frankenstein's Bride, this monstrosity of a wife. And I wanted to just quickly say that, in terms of collage being such a great medium, I also sort of feel like collage allows, by virtue of what it is and using different elements, we can use elements from the past, from the present, but we're blending the past and the present together. Sorry, I'm getting into my own head now, but the themes are so present in the human condition that whether we're, the idea of bringing the themes to contemporary life fits this narrative, because we're blending themes that are just universal to the human condition, whether it was 200 years ago or now, which I think is why maybe the book resonated so much with all of
I
us.
I'd really like to kind of relate that. There was a piece that we made together, actually, Rebecca, and you had created it was about Victor's time in London before he moves north to create the Bride of Frankenstein. But actually, you had used source imagery from both Geneva or somewhere in Switzerland and London. So you have both locations actually in the start that you gave me. And about the resonance of the themes as well. I'd like to go back to what Martha was saying about the dreaming, right, or that idea of it being a dream, because I've read some of Mary Shelley's letters about her experience when she had that dream and her experience previously in her life. And in a strange way, the novel is kind of biographical, right? She has these dreams. She lost a child early on in her life, and she has a dream of trying to revive it. by the fire. And she also lost her own mother when she was quite young. And her father remarried, I think, within 18 months. And apparently it was quite fractious within the family, right? So she had this really profound experience of parental alienation and then also infant loss. And, she's a young woman, but she's also dreaming through these things. And somebody has asked a question there about, the unconscious. We keep mentioning it, right? That she describes her own creative process in a really beautiful way, but it's just, how does all of that stuff come together in a way that makes sense? And we don't really know how it's happening, but it kind of appears in front of us. She seemed to have a bit of that in her writing, right? A bit of that in her dreaming. And I think collage also allows us to do a little bit of that, right? It can be kind of an act of dreaming, like an intentional act of dreaming, and kind of a sense of surprise, what is this here now when it's complete? But it makes sense in a very rich way when I reflect on it. I notice the things I didn't intend to be in there, but they're in there.
Yeah,
You
no, I think it's automatic. It just comes from sort of the other fields. I don't know if you guys talked already about the narcissism and the AI, et cetera, because she was also hanging with Shelley and Percy, who obviously were not respecting her. And I find it interesting that she writes the book that lasts for more than 100 years and that is still speaking to people rather than some of their work. So she was really innovative and also in this time currently where we have a very large load of narcissism every moment, every time you look at a news feed. It's like narcissism world. So right now it's a very current theme. And again, and I don't know if you guys already talked about this, but the AI factor, of this whole experience. And collage is perfect for all that because we can just pick up all these pieces. In my case, I'm always random, it's like, it's always random and it's always automatic, like, oh my gosh, did I just do that? So, yeah.
Thanks, Maureen. Let's do pick up that topic. Frankenstein has been reinterpreted across centuries. How does our collage work address modern issues like AI, intersectional identity, which is also something we brought to Frankenstein? We brought a queer lens to Frankenstein, which was really the other Anthony who really brought that topic, and that definitely ran through deeply for me. Mental health. Uh, and what parallels do you see between these topics in Shelley's original narrative?
I'd like to.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. The creature, here's this creature who's been abandoned 3 hours into his life after Victor is like devoting all this time. I was shocked in rereading it. I honestly realized at that moment that I had not ever actually understood. And the fact that he goes on his own to sit outside a hut and listen to language and learn, and he's speaking languages. He's not just mumbling around. So there's abandonment. It's all sort of, I guess it's forever. But I guess right now, just because it's more conscious, it's very current. So yeah, I'll just keep saying that. Please, Jessica. So I'm drinking wine because it's 7:30 here, and I just took a break to get somebody commented. They're like, "She's drinking."
Why wait for 7:30?
Right. When you figure it's 7:30 somewhere, so Maureen's
I was
coming.
gonna say, what the heck? Yeah.
Yeah, I was on the train. Yeah. So
I'll add in. Sorry, Jessica, were you gonna throw in there?
No, go ahead. I'll jump in after.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think, especially as we look at this through a modern lens, responsibility and the notion of what we create and what responsibility we have for what we create, I think that kind of plays in many ways. That for me was just was moving. I think the other thing about it, and I think Collage allows us to kind of uniquely address this, because we're compiling a lot of different things, and that's really what AI is doing every day, is really kind of listening out there and then bringing things together. But I think, it's funny. I look at so much of what's happening in our world, and I just think the desire to be loved is it's such a thing on a human level, and that's like at the core of this whole story for me, at least. And so that just every time it like brings me to tears. It's like shattering, and I just see that so much in the kind of I don't know, the motivations for everything that we're reading every day in what's out there. And I just that I think is such a central thing, and I think that's why, we talked a little bit about how this was such a lasting work. I think that in and of itself is such a human impulse that it really kind of speaks, I think, to why this is so lasting in so many ways. Anyway, yes, Jessica. Yes, sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you. I loved everyone's discussion about dreams and language, because I think it comes back a lot to like just the modern um, enforcement right now that we're dealing with in the States of just identity, like identity policing that we're dealing with, and the idea that like the monster is being created, and every time we just talk about it, it's being recreated. And the way that queerness, gender, it's just constantly being challenged and redefined when really it's I mean, I was reading Judith Butler on the way over just because to San Francisco, just because I just kept kind of rolling around my head of like where have I heard this before? Why our deconstruction of the monster is so familiar to the way that we're constantly deconstructing our identities on a daily basis, being challenged by our identities. And I feel like Mary Shelley's an 18-year-old is not unfamiliar to that, especially as like a young mother going to Vienna and dealing with all these themes of death and loss and her autonomy as a woman in the 18th century, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century. I get those wrong. But the idea too of just like the dreams and metaphors, AI can't replace. I mean, it's a machine that can kind of collect data and create these amazing data sets, but the human hand that we had in this collaging process is just kind of a huge, I think a huge statement to what AI just shouldn't and couldn't do. Like the AI monster would be completely different from what Mary Shelley painstakingly created for us to be working with, to be constantly turning it over in our heads, in our collages, in our daily lives. So yeah, this whole process has constantly been in my head, like I said, and everyone bringing up like language and dreams. It's like, yeah, no, as someone who speaks English at home, but like has a second language, it's like you're using metaphors to communicate with people sometimes, and that's exactly what collages do. We create these metaphors, these little dreamscapes, hoping that people understand it and that they're breaking it down to understand it too.
It was interesting because the night of the opening, I ended up being a tour guide. Anissa was tour guiding on the other side, and I was tour guiding because in the library it's not obvious where all the displays are. There's certain things are a little farther out. It was fascinating to me, the reactions, and also for myself to describe the projects. Like David, I'd say, "Oh man, David did this one. He just saved my image here." And then I'd say, Marta and Anthony did this one, and other Anthony did this, and Jessica did this, and Rebecca was playing with this, and Anissa, and it was just this strange, like I didn't know what to expect because it's not a gallery opening. And yes, all of a sudden I'm a docent for a project that I worked on, and people's reaction was really interesting. And they also picked up on things like some people were using more Victorian images, some people were using more colorful, some people were using, so it was kind of like you rocked the Boris Karloff stuff, Rebecca, and it really interesting to hear people's comments. And it wasn't just because some of them were my friends, So it was just, but a lot of these people had never seen my work before. But people really got into it once they wandered around. I had a 90-year-old friend who stole Anissa's copy of the books. So
Yes.
get a new one.
I got a new one. She definitely walked off with a book. I
told-
mean, I think that's the greatest compliment right there.
Yeah,
You
so
know?
my friend
I love that.
just kind of like, hey, you want to stop by? I wasn't expecting anything. I walk in and she's already there. And I'm like, okay. And if you meet her, she's just crazy
Delightful.
lady. And so she's sitting there with her dreads and her scene, and we're wandering around. And then she's like, can I see the book? And I was like, sure, here's Mrs. copy. And then I'm texting her later on, oh, I took the book. And I was like, oh, nice. But it was, I wish you guys could have been there to see the reaction and see the thoughtful, people were not just walking by going, yeah.
It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
And the book will be available in our library at some point, but you can also buy the book from the Collage Institute website. And I think let's answer this question from the chat, which is based on Shelley's quote, what did each of you learn about yourself? There is something at work in my soul which I do not understand. There is a love for the marvelous, even into the wild sea and unvisited regions I am about to explore. Page 22.
I can kick that off. I think, for
Hard
me,
one.
so
Hard
much
one.
of it. What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I said that's a hard question.
It's a good
And
one.
you
I
need to
love
be
it though,
brave to share
because
this.
it
You
shows
need
the
to be
depth
brave to
of
share
our
this.
audience. Good and gracious. I love that. For me, I think in many ways it's about being, creating the process of creating and watching these artists create is about being a transparent lens to the muse. And I think I saw that across the board, and I certainly personally experienced that. I don't know. As a father, I felt a lot of this. Like I was really leaning into this on a very personal level. And so I think that's for me, this was I don't know if this is the right term, but it was a creative flowering. I really felt like it was an experience of just almost mystic creation. If I'm really sounding hippy dippy right now, but I do feel like it was there for me in many ways. And so personally, I guess I connected with the process as various people in the story, and so at times I felt like the creature, at times I felt like Victor, and I think the relationship between creation and creator was definitely in the mix. As artists exploring this, I think we all have that, and every day it's what are we putting out into the world, and what's our relationship to that, and what's our relationship to the creative impulse. All of that stuff kind of was it's a heady mix, but it was all kind of in the mix. I don't know. Artists, what do you think about all that?
Well, I mean, I can say for me, there is something at work in my soul which I do not understand. The whole creative thing, like where do the ideas come from? What happens? I'll often go, into my studio, and I'll come out and I'll say to my husband, I got no ideas. I got nothing. And he'll look at me and go, art is hard. Sit with it. Art is hard. But Maureen's bio, you came back to creating during the pandemic. That was me. I actually am, by education and, professional life before kids, I'm an art historian, worked in galleries, worked in museums. That's my background. But I would always kind of dabble in collage with family photos. And my husband is always, making digital collages, and I would kind of take them and play with them. But I just started creating. But then all of a sudden it was like, wait, what's happening? What is this? What's going on? Where does it come from? So, I mean, for me, that quote is actually kind of breathtaking because it kind of sums up so much. The love for the marvelous. So I love working with fashion and women and masquerade and pretending, and basically it comes down to identity and how we present ourselves, which made Frankenstein so interesting to play with. And even in the wild sea and the unvisited regions I'm about to explore, I immediately thought of the collage, one collage I did where it's towards the end, and it's when Victor is going to look for, I think, Clerval, or was he going to look for the monster after the monster had come to see where he was creating his bride, and then he destroys the bride. Do you guys, what was he looking for Clerval specifically, or was he going after the monster after, or was he fleeing?
I think he was traveling with Henry Clerval, and then the monster was like, "Hey, you promised me a girlfriend while you're traveling." And then Victor's like, actually, this is really creepy. And then he undoes his whole work.
And he's destroyed the bride. But
Yeah.
so I did this figure of this woman leaning over with, all of the townspeople, when all of a sudden Victor is accused of the murder of Clerval. So I immediately thought of that. So that quote is really, I mean, it kind of resonates for me. And what you were talking about, David, when I was in the book, I felt like I was in the midst of it. Like I was surrounded in like a cinematic landscape, and I was just kind of traveling on the film, like a little interloper, like Frankenstein lurking in London or something, just kind of observing, and images would pop up for me. But it is definitely, I don't know, this is the most convoluted answer. I apologize, but there's something in my soul which I do not understand, obviously.
Anyone else want to address that quote?
I think it's a wonderful quote, and I mean that in a real kind of sense of like wonderment and connection with the world around us and how things come alive, right? And I do think, just to go back to the dreaming and the almost mystical aspect that you mentioned there, David, that sometimes we just kind of helm the creative process, right? But we draw really on very, very deep resources. I have that sense when I read about the wild sea and unvisited regions, right? I think we all contain that within us from all of our experiences, and we never really know exactly what mix kind of goes into the act of creation, but it's there, right? And it's just a trust in that. And I think, in reading Shelley speaking about her own dreams, I was struck by her own awareness of that, even at a young age. And I think that's one of the reasons it is such a sort of intimate book to read, right? You can have a real relationship with, as you mentioned, David, all of the individual characters, right? Because she really puts part of her soul in there. There's like the fragments of it in each of the characters and the way that they show up in relationship with each other. It's incredible, right? It's not a facetious book. It can be kitschy and it can be interesting in that way at times, but there's something very honest, I think, throughout, So, yeah. What did I learn about myself in that? I don't know. Just get into that, allow that to happen a little more, maybe.
Yeah, the journey itself. Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna bring back a question that I cut a long time ago that just kind of is in the same line. Is how did you all approach, what collages you were going to create? Did you highlight the book? Did you find quotes? Did you read the entire book and then start creating? How did that come about for you all?
I'm just going to say yes.
I mean, at the end, there was like this deluge of collages that we then started plugging in. But for me, I would find a quote that I thought was like, whoa, and then I would probably mark it and come back to it, build a collage around that quote. But then there was also an overall, just the themes that we had all discussed.
Right. I read the book. I pretty much read it first. I, of course, had the Boris Karloff thing in my head because you can't help it. The part with Justine, for some reason, it just, the injustice of it all really, I think, probably was the first really being touched of this woman, and because of class structure and lying, ends up being accused and executed for a crime she didn't commit. And it was interesting to me that it was actually not a big part of the book, but it was just like, whoa, it was, and again, you get into the layers of classes, the layers of genders, whatever, it was just, that's, I think, when I really started hitting. And then just reading the book and reading about the letters, back home from the sea captain, all of a sudden you're just already in a place where you're far away and near at the same time somehow. I don't know how to express that, but you're out in the ice fields, and then you're back home in the mind. And I don't know how she wrote it. I don't know how she did it. And I think the guy that wrote, poor William, the little, you did a great collage for that, Anissa. Poor William, the kid, it was awful, but it cracked me up that his first comment to seeing the creature and feeling threatened was to say, "I'm a Frankenstein." And you're like, what a shit. I'm sorry, can I say that? The library. It was like, wow, he almost kind of, I mean, at a certain point, I don't kill him, but on the other hand, you could think it. So it was, yeah, that the class thing, the fact that a small kid could be like, So anyway, I guess it was just rereading it and finding these tiny little vignettes that were very tiny, but they meant a lot to me. I mean, that's why, David, I really liked working with you on that collage with the Justine being executed, and you just pulled it out into the stratosphere.
That was one of the favorite pieces that I was a part of. I just loved I loved the start on that. What you originally created was stunning in its way, and I think just being able to kind of build on that was
Just take it
incredible.
off, because yeah, I had the pieces, I had the composition, and then you took it further. And that's actually one of the things when I would talk to people at the opening, people were just blown away, because I'd be, well, everything was sort of sepia toned, and and I had the coffin, I had the stuff, and then I said,
Then
this guy,
David got it.
I was going to say I'm not afraid of color. Let's
yeah,
put it that way.
and then this guy dark, so it was
Yeah.
just a tour of like, that's a David, that's a David, that's a David. He
Oh
just
no, you're very kind.
moved it,
You know that, and I will say this. I actually went from the micro to the macro, going back to the question. So I was initially kind of drawn by quotes. So I worked in series in many ways with this, in addition to what I created, and the stuff I felt like I created with people's help was the best stuff I created. But for the stuff that I was kind of playing with, I worked in series, and it started with quotes.
Mhm.
So the first series I did really was very driven by quotes and kind of illustrating quotes. As I went along, I went far more into the macro around the themes themselves. So it kind of, for me at least, it was both. And I felt like I was constantly working. Um, I don't know. I felt like I was working in larger and larger circles out from the novel. And how could I bring that into the modern sense? I mean, just I don't know. There's so many. We've talked about this. I feel like we're repeating ourselves, but or at least I'm repeating myself. There's so many layers to the book that um, I just kept finding a new layer to kind of explore, and so yeah. So I think yes, it is the answer to this as well for me at least. I mean, I started with quotes and then kind of went out into the stratosphere from there, and I think that's but it shows how rich the source material is. I mean, in and of itself, it supports that. And it doesn't, I'll be honest, the funny thing was as much as we kind of created a lot of different things, it was all 100% supported by the novel. So that was interesting to me. It wasn't like like we had people who were just making up stuff that was kind of vaguely
Yeah.
Frankenstein. We created a range of different things. To be honest, to what Maureen was saying, there's so much here in terms of the illustrations themselves, but they were all very rooted in what Mary Shelley wrote, and that speaks, I think, to the depth in so many ways. Anyway, I don't know if that answers the question,
Thank
but
you, David. It
yeah.
definitely does.
Well,
So time does go by quickly around
Oh
here.
goodness, it
So
sure
I
does.
know. So we're gonna jump into our artist-specific questions. We're gonna
Love it.
start with Marta. How does your background in animation and surrealism inform your collage interpretations of Shelley's Gothic images?
Uh,
Want me to do it
Well,
one
I
more
think
time?
that animation is animation. So, and I think it would be so wonderful to animate our collage. Maybe it will happen one day, who knows? But as far as surrealism is concerned, I would have more to say because animation is animation. And of course, Monster and Victor are very alive, very vivid, powerful. So I was thinking about them as moving figures all the time. But I mentioned that at the beginning of our meeting, the surrealism, how important it was and how it all stick together, like collage, surrealism, dreams, unconscious mind, unknown, unlocking the unconscious mind. And collage does it, and I really do believe that it unlocked us in many ways, right? Yeah, so I don't know if I have something more to say. I think that that's all.
Thank you. All right, Anthony, how does your experiences as psychotherapist and poet influence your visual exploration of belief system and wonder in your Frankenstein pieces?
I suppose I really was thinking a lot about those very human elements of loss and relationship, um, and obsession and development, right? I mean, I really was struck by Victor Frankenstein's loss of his mother, right? And then this obsession with overcoming death and the nemesis relationship that existed between Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, and the creature due to this kind of misunderstanding and fraught kind of building series of conflicts. And also, I'd like to come back to the creature themselves because, they wake up into the world and well, I think a lot about the qualities of wonder and awe, right? And awe is something that can be both fearful and really quite joyous, right? Wonder can be about small things, but awe is about things which are tend to be vast, either a concept or just even physically quite vast. And those opening scenes, we illustrated it together, Martha, with the creature just waking into a world where they don't know what they are, but somehow almost being fully formed as an adult, being quite childlike and trying to make sense of everything. That just seems like such an overwhelming state of awe, right? I'm here now, and everything is also here. And what am I in this? And how do I make sense of any of this? So I was really intrigued by that. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you, Anthony. David, in your large-scale assemblages, how do you use geometric and organic elements to reflect the duality of creation and destruction in Frankenstein? You're muted, babe.
Look at that. I'm always a day late and a dollar short. I would say the biggest thing that the biggest pieces I created were actually 30 by 40 paintings were large scale works. And those are inches for those not in the US. And so large scale was large scale in that way. I think, geometry and the cuts made, first of all, from a basic collage standpoint, we've talked a lot about that. I think there's a sense of surgery to all of that. I think there's something really powerful in that regard. But also, I think the novel again is so incisive in terms of how it kind of deconstructs all of these themes. I was just trying to convey that, I think, in a lot of ways. I think geometry itself is also a little bit of a scientific thing, and I think that kind of underscored some of the scientific themes that are present certainly in the novel. And I think all of that added up to something that, I think so often collage, it's different than, say, a representational painting. Collage is often the sum of its parts, and I think that in and of itself really does speak to creation and destruction. I think we deconstruct through the process of collage. Anthony talked about this. We are alienating from a source material in order to create something new, and that I don't know that there's something very elemental there. It's interesting for me because I think collage sometimes is kind of viewed as I hear this a lot. People are like, "Oh, you mean decoupage?" And I'm like, "Not really. Actually, that's not really the thing." Um, but there's a sense of like I think it's quite deep, and I think it's actually perfect for our times, as we've talked about in so many ways. So I think all of that kind of added up to a strong sense of deconstruction and reconstruction, creation, and kind of destruction, all kind of played into that.
Thank you, David. Maureen, how does your hybrid analog digital collage approach help you explore the themes of creation and chaos in Shelley's Frankenstein?
Well, the background, talking about doing it in the pandemic, I spent a lot of time walking around. We have a lot of free libraries in San Francisco, and I think everybody in my neighborhood was ditching all their art books and kids' books and stuff. So it really, less and less is it factory on that. But I was able I had a lot of source material. And I think because I was starting at a time when people were just reaching out to each other via Instagram or whatever else, making conversations with Collage, which is a really nice community actually, because everyone's kind of surreal. So I would do something, and ultimately, if I took a photo of it, it moved it into the digital world. And then I would like be sitting there going like, I need a dog in this. I'll find one. Frankenstein was a bit more controlled because I had to focus and deal with other people. But it's it's pretty random. It's pretty random. So I feel lucky. I feel lucky that it comes out. I'm trying to figure out, is it because I'm trying to arrange a life or a way of speaking? And maybe that's how Frankenstein was too. Both Victor and the creature were kind of trying to arrange things in their ways. So anyway,
Thank you, Maureen.
It's random.
Rebecca, how do your collages, which explore themes of beauty and identity, reinterpret the character of Frankenstein's creature as a symbol of societal rejection? Or you don't have to go that deep either. You're muted.
Sorry, I was trying not to have all the outside noise going. I'm so interested in how we present ourselves and in, particularly women, and as we age, how we present ourselves and how, fashion contributes to that. And, a lot of times when I'm collaging, the cuts are so perfect and I'm trying to kind of adhere to the imagery, or not. And so, with the Frankenstein as an image of societal rejection, I was sort of thinking about masquerade, because that's the other thing with fashion. It's masquerade. It's how we want to present ourselves. And so we put on, we create ourselves the way we want to be seen. We adorn ourselves the way we want to be perceived. And so in terms of thinking about Frankenstein, what really intrigued me was how Frankenstein perceived himself, and perceived himself to be this good, kind, gentle soul, and was so trusting. And one chapter that really stood out to me, and going back to the previous question, about, how we source the material in the book, one chapter that stood out to me from the beginning, and actually at IKEA and driving home and listening to it, and I kept replaying that, was when Frankenstein is in the woods, eavesdropping and listening to Agatha and the family, and listening to them and eavesdropping them and reading all of the books that Marta was talking about and trying to learn the language and observing relationships and wanting love. And it actually ties in everything everybody's saying. And then is taking it upon himself to leave gifts for the family and to bring them things to sustain themselves. And then he fully anticipates that they're going to accept him because of the beauty within that he's demonstrated, and they reject him outright and just spew him out. And so one collage that I did when I was trying to channel that, the inner beauty that Frankenstein felt he possessed and wanted to be seen versus how the world saw him, and I mean, how he reacted when he saw himself in that puddle, was the one of him as like it's the male model and pulling the face of, Frankenstein off. And there's this beautiful man underneath, with this ripped, torso, ripped muscles. But that was what I was trying to achieve, was that kind of, when the mask comes off, what is underneath? And so I was kind of trying to use beauty and then also the sharper angles, the geometry, the kind of jagged edges to kind of underscore that contrast. So with The Bride of Frankenstein, with the stitching and with all of that, trying to contrast that. The other thing is that the city that Anthony and I worked on together, which I was so determined to impress Anthony, and I literally dropped everything and just immersed myself. So
not to interrupt, I absolutely love that piece. That piece is incredibly strong. Yes. Anyway.
Thank you. I think it's Anthony and what he contributed to bringing the personality into the background that I did. But what I was trying to do with that is, and again, it's sort of channeling what you were saying, David, with the geometry and that kind of angles and that feeling of alienation when things don't line up, when the edges aren't perfect, when everything's not, not pristine. There's this sense of chaos and alienation. And that's what I was trying to achieve in creating that city. And so that I was trying to show that kind of sense of hiding and alienation and rejection and not wanting to be seen, and was really using that kind of sense of angularity. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I just want to say that was really successful in the strat that you gave me, because you were using both architectural elements and maps, but there was some strange curves in there that you kind of left in, and just, there was it didn't quite match up in parts, but it just, now that I think about the map that you gave me, there's a lot of hiding places in there. And it could be very easy to get lost in that street scene, right? It's kind of got that going on.
I love that you got that, because that's exactly what I was trying to give to you when we talked about it. And it was guidebooks. Weirdly, we lived in Norwich, England for a while. And so we have all these guidebooks of like the land of England and of the country houses. And my mother's Swiss, so I have all these Swiss maps and things. And so that's it. I was trying to really make it very specific to following the geography of the book. Can I just say one thing off topic that goes back to what David was saying about everything sticking to the themes? Everybody had so much purpose in really channeling everything in the book, which was so amazing, because it was this kind of great sort of like all these little pockets of seminars where we were all talking about all these themes, but everyone really wanted to really bring the book to life, which I also thought was really exciting. I mean, it sort of felt like theater in a way, that we were putting on these performances with each collage.
Thank
Sorry,
you
I got
all.
off topic.
That's all good. It's all good. And I actually just put the link to the Canva, so you can everyone can see the works and enjoy those.
Great.
All right, Jessica, how do your surrealist dreamscapes and focuses on diaspora and identity deepen the narrative of alienation and otherness in Frankenstein?
Ooh, okay.
And or the
Right.
creature, honestly.
Oh yeah. No, it's a really great question, because I was because you mentioned that the library has a surrealist exhibition. There's a Leonora Carrington one happening in Waltham right now that I'm dying to get to, and I just love that all these surrealist like women artists that like foundationally set the tone for surrealism were all Mexican or like mixed. Like Frida Kahlo is mixed German and Mexican, and then leaned into like her Oaxacan roots. But like just being in this in between. I talk a lot about like liminal spaces with my therapist, but the liminal space of just the identity has been like where I felt the most myself, and like this group project of just creating something within this like discrete margin of the text just felt so right, especially with like Mary Shelley being like 18, developing her like identity, like watching these men and creating this like basic queer fan fiction of the boys that she was traveling with and these letters between them. And it's just like it was just a really interesting way for me to express parts of my identity that I didn't think this would be like the place to do it, but like it had elements of horror, alienation, but then also just like the beauty of language and learning, and then like these interludes with like Agnes and Safi and this whole family and this woman learning English while the monster is lurking in the background. It just amazing. I thought it was a really fun opportunity to just be creepy, and I think everyone really supported that, and I loved just how we had this like language for horror um and just like self-discovery with each collage. There wasn't just like, you know, you need to have this, you need to have that per collage. We just found a way to like weave our narrative into the text.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessica. And thank you, everyone. I really feel even more today like how connected that Frankenstein has made us together. And it probably won't ever leave us now that it is so embedded in us. All right, friends, I thank you so much for being here. Library community, as always, we love you. And we encourage you to come down here and check out the exhibit. Jessica, I'll see you soon. And Maureen, I'll see you
Greetings from
sometime.
Poland.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Yeah,
so much,
great
all.
to see you guys.
Thank
All right, we'll see you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.